Alright, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. So we've had some updates to the Bull Szat deck, the Tevesh Szat Rograkh deck. And I went in and threw them. If you watched the last video, I threw the changes into a notepad that you'll see here. But I'll quickly kind of touch on the thought process behind them, and then we'll get into some games. Basically, the main reason that this deck loses when it loses typically revolves around just not being able to play your cards. Sometimes that's because the opponent has very pinpoint disruption that you're just not able to deal with. That can happen, certainly. It's a little less common. Usually it's somewhat self-inflicted. It's just a matter of not drawing enough mana sources in the right time, and then the opponent gets too far ahead, they run away with the game, and you know, or you never even get to play at all, right? So in order to mitigate that, we're trying to add more mana sources, and the trick is to try to find the best mana sources. And how do we define the best? Basically, it's the things that are faster, so they allow us to deploy multiple mana on a single turn. Those are the kind of things that we're trying to run in here. Things mana sources that disrupt the opponent, or mana sources that come with additional upsides. So an example of that would be, well, we'll talk about that in a second. First of all, we'll start with the disruption. Obviously, Rishadan Port's a card, for those of you who've played long enough, this card was actually a card that they specifically went out of their way to print a solution to, because back then sets didn't rotate as quickly, and it was so disruptive and so problematic that they had to print a card that people would be willing to main deck just to deal with this card. That's how frustrating it was at one time in Magic's history. The card they actually printed was this card here called Sabo's Web. It was a 2-drop artifact that draws a card, and lands with activated abilities don't untap as long as Sabo's Web is in play. It's a pretty solid card because it's a low cost and it has a disruption effect, and basically it would prevent Dust Bowl and Rishadan Ports from untapping, which was really huge at the time. But having said that, it's also a land drop, and being able to put an extra land drop in the deck to just make the Mox Diamond a little bit more consistent, to make sure that we kind of deploy our early game on time, is important. And the fact that we can use it as a sort of retargetable strip mine effect, basically, whenever we have extra mana, which we often do actually. Once the game gets going, we frequently have extra mana sources laying around, so being able to disrupt the opponent like that, really, really nice. It also combos quite well with the Winter Orb that's in the deck, and making it even harder for your opponent to climb out from under that. You untap Rishadan Port as your chosen land, and then you tap their untapped land with using something else, like, for example, Mana off a Paradise Mantle, which is another card that's made its way back into the deck. I tested this briefly, and at first it wasn't very good. I didn't think in the way that the deck was constructed, as far as how the deck was curving out. Now it feels a little bit better, just because I understand, first of all, I have a better understanding of how this deck wants to play, and secondly, the curve's been lowered. We have more 3-drops, and the fact that Paradise Mantle can basically function as a Birds of Paradise. So for 0 you play Rog, 0 you play the Mantle, 1 mana you equip it, is the equivalent of going first turn land tap Birds of Paradise in terms of cards from hand and in terms of mana spent. And having a Bird of Paradise available in your black-red deck is fantastic. It does multiple things. It allows you to play turn 2 like Jessica's Will, and do some really disgusting plays there. It allows you to also do some things that you might not have considered, like casting the spells that you potentially steal from Ragavan, because Ragavan doesn't let you play the cards that you steal off the top of their deck without paying the colored mana cost requirements. So Bird of Paradise Mantle just gives you another colorless mana that you can, mana of any color that you can use to play those cards. Also, there's a trick that was pointed out to me by Eric, guy that I was introduced to from Brian. He's a fan of the channel. He's a buddy that collaborates here, along with some of our other buddies, and he pointed out a really interesting trick, which is that under the right conditions, you can cheat the Winter Orb with Paradise Mantle. Like, how does that work? Well, obviously, it works around Winter Orb, but the specific, when I say cheat the orb, I mean basically untap all of your lands under the Winter Orb, while a Winter Orb is in play. That's what I mean when I say cheat the Winter Orb. So one of the ways you can do that is you have Karn the Great Creator out, so you make Winter Orb a 2/2 creature, and then you equip it with Paradise Mantle, and you tap it at the end of their turn. Alternately, you can make it a 2/2 creature and just tap it to a Springleaf Drum at the end of their turn, and all of your mana will untap, which is pretty amazing. And if you have like Rishadan Port running, and they can't get artifact mana because of the Karn, they're not going to get regular lands because of the Winter Orb Port combo, and you can literally just lock them out of the game for the most part with that combination of cards, which is pretty cool, right? So we're not building the deck to do, to put a 5-card combo together that slows your mana down. What we're trying to do is put a bunch of independent effects that are all good on their own, and then have a synergy that when you combine them, you get like an additional bonus powerful effect. So think of it like a video game where, you have like two really, a powerful, say, rifle and a powerful knife, and then you put them together, and now you get the bayonet ability added to your rifle or something. So that's the kind of thing that you want to be thinking about sometimes when you're deck building, right? Just adding synergies. And with that in mind, another really solid mana source in the deck is Thought Vessel. I was using briefly Everflowing Chalice in this deck, and Chalice is better than Thought Vessel as soon as you play it for 4, if you have the mana to do that. But until then, it's worse. Where Thought Vessel at least comes with that additional upside of giving you no limit on your hand size. And as I said just momentarily about the synergy thing, that gives us some extra synergistic situations that we can leverage to win a game. So you can, for example, with a Thought Vessel out or having played it after the fact, you can do a giant ad nauseum and just keep all the cards, which is really good. You can, of course, a lot of times we are pitching to Tevesh Szat. Sometimes you draw a hand and it's filled with removal, but there's just no targets right now, and but for whatever reason you didn't get lucky, you didn't hit any mana sources, so you're sitting with 7, 8, 9 cards in hand going, oh geez, I got to discard. You have the Thought Vessel out, it mitigates that. You can, of course, get the combo of Thought Vessel into play and then Necro, and then over Necro and just put 20, 30 cards in your hand and pass for the turn, and even if they blow it up, as long as they don't blow it up at the end of your turn, if they blow it up on their turn, you have all those cards to start your turn, and all you need is for one of them to be, most likely it'll be a bunch of mana, and then at least one of them to be a Demonic Tutor or a Yawgmoth's Will, and you could just put the Thought Vessel back into play, or you could just dump them all and probably find a way to win the game anyway when you have that many cards, right? So super interesting synergistic effect for very, very little downside that just feeds into what we're trying to do anyway, which is deploy our commander fast and early. And of course, it also works around Winter Orb. It's just a good card, and better in this deck. Another way to cheat the Orb, of course, is Sword of Feast and Famine. Again, we're not adding these cards because of Winter Orb, but we're looking at how adding these cards has additional side benefits, additional synergies, right? So Sword of Feast and Famine, the way to think of this card essentially is that this is a Mana Flare. So if you look at Mana Flare, I don't think I actually own one because this card I would never play outside of some very select and specific deck construction scenarios. But Mana Flare, old school card, here we go. So whenever a land taps for mana, that player adds 1 mana of any type that land produced. So it's a 3 mana investment that doubles your mana, but comes with the downside of also doubling theirs off of lands, right? Sword of Feast and Famine is a 3 mana investment, 5 total when you count the equip cost, that doubles the amount of mana that your lands produce, but doesn't affect them at all, and also makes them discard, right? So you're paying a 3 mana investment for a Mana Flare because, I say a Mana Flare because you're going to get to tap all your lands and then tap them all again. That's a tremendous upside, a huge increase in power spike, like over the old school Mana Flare. And Mana Flare is a pretty gross and powerful effect. I guess you could look at it as like a 3 mana plus 2 mana to equip Gauntlet of Might. Gauntlet of Might is a 5 mana card that doubles mana. I believe it's 5, maybe it's 4. It's been a bit. 4 mana card. So they go to Gauntlet of Might. Red creatures get +1/+1 whenever mountains tap for mana. Its controller adds an additional red. Again, another card that doubles your mana, and of course it has the Crusade effect as well. Super powerful effect. It's supposed to. It should be just for you, and in a lot of cases it will be, but in some cases it won't. And the fact that it won't is a significant enough downside that in general I wouldn't play a card like that because I don't want to give my opponent bonus mana. under any conditions, and Sword of Feast and Famine just gives them a discard effect every turn instead. So when you're looking at this card, look at it as a mana source that also comes with some discard. Don't look at it as a discard that comes with some mana. So when you think of it that way, this card, because it produces additional mana for the most part, is a really good. Somebody asked me specifically about some of the other swords, like, hey, why don't you try this one or why don't you try that one? All good ideas, all reasonable ideas, but the reason is for not using most of the other swords is that when the opponent has no cards in hand, this Sword of Feast and Famine doesn't. You lose the black half of the card, right? You're not getting extra cards with it, but you're retaining the green side. You're still getting the personalized mana flare, and that means that the card is always good. It's never dead. And if you look at some of the other swords, like for example, there's one that says destroy a planeswalker or an artifact. If you connect with it, it's pro red and pro black. That's a super amazing effect that we would certainly be very interested in running. But if they have no planeswalkers or artifacts, it gives you nothing under those conditions. It just gives you nothing. So if they're playing like a green land ramp deck that tries to hasten its way into like a giant tooth and nail or something, it's just sitting there doing nothing for you. Whereas Sword of Feast and Famine, and then the next one, Sword of Fire and Ice, give you something even when there's no target. So Fire and Ice has the shock effect for red, and the card draw effect on blue, and the card draw effect and the shock effect to the opponent's face. But if we're not worried about that in a 40 life format, and we generally aren't, the shock effect, if you just want to look at it, it's just kill target creature most of the time. So that ability is great, or damage a planeswalker, but it's the card draw. The card draw is always on. So even if there's no targets and you're dealing 2 damage and somebody has 40 life, so whatever. The fact that you're getting the card drawing means this card's also always good. So what we have here is a 3 mana Phyrexian Arena, and that costs them life instead of us, and a 3 mana flare that costs them cards instead of giving them mana. And that's why these 2 cards have made the cut. There's almost always a creature laying around. And because with the changes, we've added Paradise Mantle, Sword of Feast and Famine, Sword of Fire and Ice. That's 3 pieces of equipment into the deck. In the past, I would have said on turn 1, you want to hold Rog, Son of Rograkh, in your command zone, and only deploy it when you need it, so that they don't kill it, and then you don't have it on board for something like you top deck Calling the Weak and it's dead, right, and it slows you down. That's not the case anymore. First of all, in general, even in that scenario, they're spending mana and a card to kill something that costs you no mana and no cards. So you're actually getting ahead when your opponent removes Rog. So just deploy it on turn 1. But more importantly, you don't know, you might top deck one of your equipment, and if you don't have a unsummoning sick Rog to use it on, you're going to feel really bad. Like, you're going to be back a turn. So the chances that they want to spend removal on a 0-drop 0-1 that doesn't do anything, and except costs them tempo, like that's just not going to happen almost hardly ever. And even if it does, it's probably good for you. But the chance that you're not able to use your Paradise Mantle or your sword, on the other hand, is never good for you, always bad for you. And that chance is more reliable. Like, that's going to come up more often than the first scenario. So with these changes, always play a turn 1 Rog. Your first turn should be Rog coming to play, with one possible exception, and that exception is, like, say you're playing against a green-based deck, your opening hand has plenty of mana, you're holding Toxic Deluge, you're pretty confident you're going to be deluging, pretty soon because of the fact that they're green, or Fiery Confluencing. Say you're holding Fiery Confluence, another card that would kill Rog. Under circumstances like that, probably you don't deploy them on turn 1. But it has to be a very kind of specific scenario when you would not deploy Rog on turn 1. The rest of the time you would. And even in cases like that, it's possible, depending on what's going on, you could, say, throw a sword onto Rog and then Fiery Confluence for 2 or Deluge for 2, and even then, having him out didn't hurt you. One thing to keep in mind, by the way, with this equipment is that Rog has, besides First Strike, that's important, but he has Menace and Trample. Menace means he can't be blocked unless they block with at least 2 creatures, and Trample means that even if they chump block, additional damage will carry over. Well, a sword puts them at 2 power, so if they double block, their creatures have to have at least 1 toughness, which means that you're not going to trample over the top unless you have 2 swords going. But menace means that if they have 1 blocker, they cannot chump block. And because swords also come with pro colors, two protection from 2 different colors, on top of all the other stuff that they do, there's a lot of scenarios where your opponent just cannot block Rog, and that is excellent. That means that's just another reason, I guess, that you want to keep in mind. It's another thing that you want to keep in mind when you're assessing whether or not the swords are going to be useful for you. Is that they can't just throw down a chump blocker and be cool. Like there's no. I've Sword of Feast and Famine, and then they just play like a Snapcaster Mage. It's not going to get it done for them. They're still going to get hit. I'm still going to get my mana back. So the swords are actually a little bit better in here than they would be in with a different commander, just because of that menace ability that almost never really seems to come up. Suddenly the swords make that meaningful. And finally, Sorin was cut for Bedevil. Sorin the Merciless is really good. It fits in here. It was our only life gain by the time this cut was made. There's now no life gain. You just have to use your life total conscientiously. But the thing about Bedevil is, in general, there isn't a quantity of artifact removal that is too much that you can put in your deck. There's only too much limited artifact removal. Like, for example, Shatter, a card that just is a cheap artifact killing card, might be a little bit over the top for this deck because it doesn't have additional modes. But any artifact removal that has extra modes is a card we probably want to look at. So one of the problems with this deck was Planeswalkers was giving it a little bit of frustration. The swords have actually helped a lot with that because they allow you to pressure Planeswalkers as well as do the rest of what you're doing. And Bedevil is another card that takes out a Planeswalker while giving you the ability to also crush artifacts, which is super important. And then the fact that it can kill a creature like a commander as even more value. At instant speed, it's 2 colors. You can imprint it on a Chrome Mox, which is nice. So the card seems to be like this is the deck. This is the home for that card. It seems like it is a card that probably could be cut, given that it is a little difficult to cast. But overall, I suspect it's probably here to stay, because of the fact that it kills artifacts. And so when we're looking at adding like another good card, for example, against Planeswalkers is the one that kills target Planeswalker or a creature. And I think I have an example of that right here. Let's see what's going on with our search here. I'm having my brain's just not doing it for me right now. Okay, here we go. Dreadbore. So destroy target creature or Planeswalker. Another really good Planeswalker removal card. It's modal. It potentially kills their commander as well. If their commander is a creature or a Planeswalker, it's pretty nice. And it's cheap. But it's not an instant, which sometimes matters. But more importantly, this thing doesn't kill artifacts. And that's been my big problem with it. If the card also if it said artifact, creature, or Planeswalker, and then Bedevil was just the instant version of that, so you pay a little more mana to get instant, we would probably just play both, because, having that ability to kill an artifact is so important that picking up an extra one of those is worth it. We'd probably find a slot. But the fact that the card doesn't kill artifacts, it really kind of weakens it significantly. If we're going to play a card that doesn't kill artifacts, it's got to come with enough upsides as far as for our removal suite. It's got to come with enough upsides that that it's compelling. An example being Shatter Skull Smashing, where the upside is that it's actually a 30-second land over here that we can pitch to we can imprint on Chrome Mox, which is unusual for a land, and has the ability to kill multiple targets. It can kill Planeswalkers. So okay, yeah, that's a card that doesn't kill artifacts, but that's acceptable. Deadly Rollick is a card that almost always costs 0 and exiles the target. That's pretty acceptable. A 0 mana Swords to Plowshares is pretty awesome. Deluge, it's a sweeper, so it kills mass targets. Same thing for Fire Covenant. These are very acceptable. That they don't kill planeswalkers is okay because the things they do kill, they do it very cheaply and in quantity, right? So, but if you look at the rest of our removal, I think the only other card that doesn't kill planeswalkers, you got Collective Brutality, which is also a discard spell. That's acceptable. I said we didn't have any life gain, but technically we can gain 2 off of Brutality, and maybe 2 more if we flash it back. And finally, there's Feed the Swarm, which is our only directly card that directly says kill an enchantment. So, we're going to take it for that. But everything else kills artifacts, everything, right? Like all the other removal in the deck, the Shattering Spree, the Gorilla Shaman, the Braid, Angerous Rampage, all this stuff. It all kills artifacts, and that is because that is the primary threat in the format. And you've got to be able to do it, but you can't go so hard on artifacts that all you do is kill artifacts and then you just die to elves, or you die to like a combo deck that doesn't really care about lots of mana, is just trying to kind of put together an enchantment-based combo or whatever. So we're focused on the primary threats, but we are not. But we do like having the flexibility, and Bedevil gives us all of that. And Sorin was more good stuff. It really felt good in the deck, but it also how do I put this? The problem with Sorin is that it felt very very reasonable value. Like, this is a good card. Getting extra cards at 4 mana is good. Having the option to make the 2/3 flyer is good, and then having the occasional 13 points drain life is a really nice upside to all that. But good cards are not good enough. The cards need to be great, and the card wasn't really great. Like, it's not a card that I was going, hey, I'm willing to consider a turn 1 Calling the Weak to play Sorin. Like, for the most part, that really wasn't on my radar. I was, let's just wait till turn 2 and get Tevesh out, right? But there are cards that I would turn 1 Calling the Weak into, depending on what my opponent's doing. My opponent dumps out land, Soul Ring, tap it, Arcane Signet, play Mana Crypt, cast, Coalition Relic, and charge it, and I go first turn Calling the Weak Karn. It's probably game over for them, right? I probably just won the game on the spot. Sorin there's no scenario where Sorin really did that, and if it doesn't really do that, it kind of misses the mark. I mean, a Thran Dynamo early can win a game for you. A Smokestack early can actually win the game for you. Same for almost all these cards. An early Statue, Lotus, Ad Nauseum, and such. If you go first turn Rog and then they go land and you go land, and you cheat out like a Sword of Feast and Famine or Fire and Ice particularly, and maybe they go Bird or something, and you Fire and Ice and swing in, and now they're just stuck in this scenario where they can't block, remember, because of Menace, so they can't even throw the bird in front. So you're going to connect with their face, deal 2 to the bird, kill the bird, draw an extra card. Like, it's just gross, right? So that's what we want. We want cards like that, cards that we're willing to ritual out because they will probably win the game for us. And Sorin just didn't. I guess it'd slowly start drawing you some cards, but at that point, you'd rather hold out for Tevesh, who will quickly draw you cards, and that was the problem I was having with Sorin, is that it was in that weird place where for 1 more mana I can do something so much better that maybe it's worth just not playing this card. And when you have cards that are worth not playing, you probably shouldn't play them. So he got cut. So that is it for the cuts. And now let's take a look at some of the games. I believe with these games I did not have, I think for most of these games I did not have Rishadan Port in the deck. I was actually testing out, what is this card? Rakdos Carnarium. I actually really like this card in this deck. It's weird because it's a come into play tapped land. It's weird because you have to pick up a land. But one way to look at this card is a 0 mana Worn Power Stone that makes 2 mana of any color. Like, this is basically an uncounterable Soul Ring starting on the turn after you play it. And it also guarantees you're going to hit a land drop on that turn. This card's really good. I'm not certain that the card does not deserve a home in here. It does give you some extra tricks. I think I'll pull it off in one of the games, but basically if you have City of Traders, you can then play Rakdos Carnarium, and then you have 2 triggers that go on the stack. One's the bounce land, and one is to sack the city. You can put them on the stack in whatever order you want. So you put the Sacrifice on the stack first, on the bottom, and then on top of that you put the bounce, and so second, and then you resolve the bounce first, because you resolve in reverse order, and you pick up the City of Traders, and then the sacrifice effect happens, but it's in your hand, so you get to keep it. So that's a nice trick with Rakdos Carnarium, very similar to the Dust Bowl trick, where you play Dust Bowl, trigger the city, and then use the city to activate the Dust Bowl. But anyway, I haven't found a spot for it, but don't be surprised if this card makes its way back in, because a card that gives you 2 mana is worth a little tiny bit of like a pause on your deployment of your mana. And it's probably worth the risk that your opponent can disrupt you, just because, like I said, the effect is so powerful. And of course it works very nicely with Mox Diamond and a few other things. So where that card, Winter Orb, so where that card would go, I am not sure. It may replace a land, possibly. It may replace a spell, and we can treat it like a 0-drop Worn Power Stone, basically. Totally not sure. Another trick with the Carnarium is that you could play Shatterskull Smashing face on its mana face, and then later on you can pick it up and use it for its spell ability, which is kind of cool. So it has like a lot of little interesting, intriguing sort of value scenarios, where this card can be quite worthwhile. And obviously once it's going, a land that taps for both of your colors is crazy good. So keep that in mind. The card might make the cut. I don't know, you play a workshop, use it for value, play a Rakdos Carnarium, pick the shop up, throw it away to a Mox Diamond, stuff like that. Interesting card, but for now it is not in the deck. Kind of have to evaluate what cut where that would be slotted in, and then how it will impact things, and how often I get completely blown out by like a strip mine or something. But let's get into some games now. And is there anything else that I wanted to talk about why I cut. So Pentad Prism was a test slot anyway, no big deal. Just better to ramp out, the Paradise Mantle or Ports are just doing more than what the Prism was doing. Grief and Unmasked's problem was that actually the deck is so brown and red and lands that a lot of times you just didn't have spare black cards to play, unlike in a mono black deck where these cards have probably better suited. So a lot of times we were just looking at a situation where you cast Grief pitching your Hymn to Torok or something, and it does not feel good, right? So at that point, let's put the reusable discard in. Let's get rid of these and let's get some extra mana in there. They just didn't quite. Basically, these are discard / removal cards, and we put in 2 discards, a discard and a removal card to replace them. So the net gain for us is that we don't have to pitch 2 extra cards, and that these are reusable. Karn, it's just a great card, but again, it fell into that exact problem of Sorin, which I've already described. Whereas at 4 mana, I was just looking at it going, it's a really, really slow card accumulation engine. And it does make the robots, which are good, and a little bit better with the swords in the deck. But I'm not sure that that's enough to thrill me into wanting to play it. There's kind of like better things I can do than attack you with a 2/2, then a 3/3, then a 4/4. Especially if your opponent just, like, imagine if they play Karn and we're Karn Scion of Urza and we're playing this deck. We barely care at all. We're gonna clean those up in a second. We'll Vandalblast them. We'll Shattering Spree by force. We'll sweep the ward with Fire Covenant or whatever. So we'll get around to that. But we can pretty much ignore the Karn and just treat it as a really slow and crappy card draw engine that we'll deal with when we get around to it. And when that's the case, that's a card that goes on the chopping block for cutting. This is, of all the cuts, like I could see, Karn's one of them that you could potentially re-add. I wouldn't call it crazy. But for now, it just felt like, the 4 slot was really cluttered. Look at this, 4 4-drops that we cut. It was really cluttered. We were taking way too much damage off Ad Naz, for example, and Dark Confidant, and this just cleans things up a lot better. Underworld Breach. The problem with Breach is that unlike Yawgmoth's Will, where you can do something like Dark Ritual, Calling the Weak, Cabal Ritual, cast Yawg Will, then Dark Ritual, Calling the Weak, Cabal Ritual again. You get to play one of those cards off of the Underworld Breach. We don't have a massive quantity of cards that we can shove into the graveyard quickly enough to make Underworld Breach consistently as powerful or more powerful than Yawgmoth's Will. And so the card was effectively functioning like a red regrowth, like literally like the card regrowth. So I mean, hopefully you know what this card does, but yeah, it was functioning just like this card for the most part for this deck, where you would spend 2 mana to get an extra like 1 spell, because you'd have maybe 5 cards in the graveyard, you can play 1 of them, and that's not bad. I mean, if the card you're popping out is like Necropotence or something, that's cool. But it's not great. And if if the cards in your graveyard were mostly a removal and there was no targets, then the card just sat in your hand, like waiting for an opportunity to use it. Yes, in the late game, it's completely absurd and broken, but your game might have gone late because you're sitting there with a card you can't use for all that time while you're waiting for an opportunity to use the breach. And that's the problem I was running into with the card in this deck, is it just was very slow and difficult to get to the point where I could get even 2 cards worth of value out of it. And then when I did, I sometimes was squeezing value out by sort of like low impact plays, like Angerous Rampage, and I kill your Llanowar Elf or something, like, and that's cool. I'm getting some value. I'm getting a little bit of card advantage, but I'm not thrilled that I waited all game just to get a couple extra small like advantages. I would much rather have an extra mana source in play that gets my commander out a turn earlier and causes me to draw 2 to 3 extra cards by that phase of the game 1 turn earlier, and be way ahead on cards just because I'm faster. Because Tevesh Szat rewards us for getting him into play that much more. And so for that reason, the cards cut. I think Paradise Mantle will actually produce more card advantage because it will land Tevesh Szat earlier, sooner. And that's where our primary card advantage is derived from. And so that's why Breach. Also, it had some anti-synergy, some non-bow with our threshold cards, Cabal Ritual and Barbarian Ring, both of which want us to have 7 cards in the graveyard if we can, and Breach was not as good with them. I will miss breaching a Rog who I like put in the graveyard specifically as fuel for a breach. I'll miss that sweet little interaction there, which was pretty cool, and then breaching him right back into the command zone. But I don't think it's a huge deal. I'll also kind of miss being able to exile artifacts with breach and then snag them back into my hand with Karn the Great Creator. Another very cool little interaction. And I liked having the regrowth. So this is, of all the cards that are cut, I would say Breach is certainly sort of, and because it's relatively cheap, we always want to add cheap cards before we add expensive cards. Breach is certainly on the list of perhaps that cut is a mistake and perhaps it should be in the deck. But right now I think a mid to late game card is not what we're looking for. Cheap or not, a mid to late game card is not exactly where we want to be. We're still looking to make the early game as destructive and devastating for our opponents as possible, and Breach doesn't really fit that role. The other thing about Underworld Breach that is such a big deal, I guess I should bring it up for those who haven't seen it before, but the other thing about Breach that isn't as compelling is the fact that, with Will, a lot of times you will and you get a value will where you're just like, you Yawgmoth's Will and then use it to replay another strip mine and then maybe like, I don't know, a dead Mox Opal or something, or a Lotus that you burned or whatever. And you're just getting like small value, but you're getting disruption and mana. And Breach struggles to do that because it won't let you put lands into play. If the card just said each card in your graveyard has escape, and you were still restricted to the 1 land per turn rule or whatever, then Breach being able to acting as a 2-mana regrowth for strip mine would mean that it would 100% make the cut. So like that's the thing that would make the difference. If I could just spend 2 mana to essentially sinkhole my opponent, there are games where that would be enough to make this card good enough that it would make the cut. But alas, non-land really takes a lot of the oomph out of it for what this deck is trying to do at the pace that this deck is trying to do it. Underworld Breach was also a card that you would do an early Jessica's Will and hit the Breach and you'd be like, because one of the 3 cards that you hit is now kind of useless. and you want to minimize that as much as possible. So there's just little areas where the card wasn't as stellar in this deck as it is in some other things. So anything like that has to get cut. All right, so in the last 7 days, I played quite a bit early morning and the night before on the 4th and 5th. And I was actually having real struggles. You can see like a loss and a win here, a win and a loss here, and then a win. You saw a loss and a win again here. 5-color bad stuff, Colossum, Francois 911. These are all challenging opponents. Made the adjustments to the deck. You can see I played a few more games in the morning. Made the adjustments, went to sleep, woke up, made the changes, and then it's been a string of unbroken victories since. However, you can also see here that I'm a Donkey's a tough opponent. The DeCarolus probably would be, but you're going to see how those games will go in a second. But for the most part, I would say that, I haven't faced like Francois 911, 5-color bad stuff, Colossum, who are some of the others? Some of the other more commonly well-known, I guess, challenging opponents. Haven't seen. There's a handful I haven't seen anyway lately. And in the meantime, I guess I'll throw this out there. I went into my account settings, and if you come over here and you look over here, boy, this is all wrong. But if you come over here and you look at the Buddies Clan and chat, you can see I stripped off everyone from my blocked list just to give myself the opportunity to potentially play people that I may have blocked at one point for whatever reason in a game. Usually that's because of bad sportsmanlike conduct. But in my view, everyone gets a second chance. So I've actually cleaned up my block list. There were a couple hundred people on there from the last few years. Well, from going all the way back to 2009. And it's completely open. So if you've ever been blocked and you feel like you want to play, absolutely jump in a game and let's have a good game. But in the meantime, let's take a look at the games following the adjustments, with the one exception of no Rishadan port. But we'll go in starting on 7/24 with the DeCarolus, and then we'll just keep moving. I love the fact that port also, we cut the two discards, which helped significantly against specifically blue decks. And then port, we added port, and port will help against blue decks since we're not running that, as will sort of Feast and Famine potentially. So the loss, I think, is kind of counterbalanced by the gain, and the gain is more significant than the loss, and that's kind of what you want to be doing when you're deck building. All right, so let's take a look at the DeCarolus running Baral, Chief of Compliance. This is normally a commander that can be very problematic. Typically, these decks run boatloads of cheap counter and bounce, and a deck like ours would typically have a serious uphill battle, because it's so easy for your opponent to counter, and they have so many counters that even you thought seize them and you go, okay, well, fine, you want to take my negate, my memory lapse, my remand, and you're like, geez, I can't resolve anything even if I do make you discard, right? So with that in mind, let's see how we do against the DeCarolus running mono blue Baral. And obviously, if I'm going first, or I could go first turn commander, I am not going first, but my opponent does me a solid, plays Myriad Landscape. So barring Alpha Mulligan, so barring a Force of Will effect, we're going to go for it here, I think. The extra land there is kind of nice. Always play turn 1 Rog. I'll say this again, always play turn 1 Rog, with the one exception of if you're confident that you plan to Toxic Deluge, or Fiery Confluence and kill creatures. But outside of that, always play turn 1 Rog. Just get in the habit. I know it feels weird. I know it feels risky. I know it feels like, I'm exposing it. Trust me, play turn 1 Rog. Fix that habit if you don't have it because of the equipment in this deck. But anyway, all right, gonna thought seize here. So I end up thought seizing because I figured with the strip mine, so this is a very specific scenario, but I figured with the strip mine, they're going to play a land. They can only have 1 blue up, so I can strip mine them, clear my attack step, then Ritual, Cabal, and then Cabal Ritual, and play my commander next turn anyway. And so for this exact scenario, this made more sense to me, because if my opponent did have a Soul Ring, they couldn't play it last turn, theoretically, and I could take it right there. Well, I don't see a Soul Ring. I do see a Swan Song, which would disrupt my Dark Ritual plan, and so I go ahead and just take that. I'll leave him with islands and some card draw and card selection. That's fine. So we'll check off the island. Opponent decides to play Baral. So outside of them having top decked a counter here, we are home free to go for the commander. I could actually go for a smokestack here. That is not a bad play at all. I could also do something funky with like Ritual, Cabal Ritual, Yawgmoth's Will, Ritual, Cabal Ritual, Thoughtseize, and then make a play, and that might be the way we go. Keep in mind, this is the exact scenario I was talking about where Yawg Will does something that Underworld Breach just doesn't, and you can see if I had a Breach here instead of like a Will, obviously that wouldn't be the swap, but I'm just saying, if I had a Breach here, you can see how it really just wouldn't do anything at this phase in the game at all, and that's not, this phase of the game is what matters most. So I'm going to Deadly Rollick first, because if the one card my opponent drew was the free commander counterspell, I do not want them countering here, right? So, you know, that's what we're playing around. So we'll get the strip mine down, and then I run out the Cabal Ritual first to see if my opponent has, like, maybe they drew like a Daze or something. Only because I'm willing to accept that, because I can still play my commander next turn if they did, and I would rather throw the slightly weaker Ritual out as a test case. They don't, so I Ritual again. Let's move this over here. All right, so I Ritual again, play my commander. Immediately, we're going to draw 3 cards. Beautiful. And my opponent knows that this game is over. I mean, this is their hand, right? They can go land Jace Beleren and like draw 1 card or whatever. But they're so far away from getting in this game. I get to strip mine. You know, they could land in landscape. Like, what do they do here? I'm going to be drawing 3 cards per turn for most of the game, and digging into their mana and disrupting them. And to save time, my opponent just moves on to the next game. So the Careless jumps into game 2. Again with Baral. And let's see what happens here. Okay. So again, they're playing Baral, and I have a hand that... Alright, so here's the rule for mulliganing with this deck. It's a weird rule. It's kind of it's a funky rule, but in general, I would say this rule applies almost always. If your opening hand cannot play your commander by turn 3, under like, with just what you see in your hand, or maybe like, you know, if I draw a land, other than those 2 situations, that either if I draw a land, I can play my commander by turn 3, or I have a commander by turn 3 in my hand. If your hand does not meet that condition, it's a mulligan. So this hand here is a perfectly valid hand. I could like Urborg and then City of Traders. I'd have double black if I draw like a him. I can sneak an opposition agent out, maybe cheat something out, possibly even get a mana for Ragavan or something. I can kill Baral early on and have Ad Nauseam as a direction for my construction. But this hand cannot get turn 3 Tevesh. None of that matters. It's a mulligan. So mulligan into this. This hand cannot get turn 3 Tevesh. It has disruption. It has like 3 mana sources. Really good disruption against blue. I can kill Baral. I can kill artifact mana. It doesn't have turn 3. You know, I'd mulligan back the smokestack and then just go for it. But I can't play turn 3 commander. It's a mulligan. I know it sounds terrible, but there's a reason for it. Trust me, it is the correct. It is the metric that you need to use when you're deciding your mulligans. This hand can play turn 3 commander. This hand is a keep. So we're going to have to figure out what to throw away. And I decide that I will throw away, against them, I'm going to throw away the Byforce, and I'm going to throw away the opposition agent. I'm going to go for all mana. Rag gives me like a kind of sort of backup plan if things go wrong. So I'm gonna stick with this. And I won the roll too. So I get to go first turn. Somebody asked me, talked to me about cutting Gilded Lotus. I can't remember who it is, but hopefully you've watched enough of the videos by now. The person who had the question, to understand how absolutely insane and incorrect that would be. This deck thrives on Gilded Lotus. All right, so we're gonna get that down specifically here, and then dash in with Ragavan, and then go ahead and play the commander. Always play turn 1 commander before I can even attack my opponent's scoops. Of course, this is a turn 2 commander. We hit him. Whatever we flip, we flip. We get a treasure token, and the next turn we can go swamp, treasure, Lotus, commander. That's even without hitting him with the Ragavan. Beautiful draw. We'll move on to the next game. So, hey, if you're going to triple mulligan, that's what you, or if you're going to look at 3 opening hands, you want one of them to look like that, right? All right, so then I've got this game against the Pelican. I'll come back to that. Let's finish the De Carolus series here, the De Carolus set. Okay, so my mono blue opponent is probably thinking, dang, this guy's lucky, and you know, if he would just stop getting lucky, then we could actually have a real game. My opponent is not factoring in the fact that this is what this deck does and designed to do, and of course we have a, can we get the commander in play by turn 3? Yes, okay, we keep. All right. In fact, I went first, so we'll get him into play. How about by turn 1? That seems good. And why not draw some cards and then throw a recurring card drawing engine, so next turn we can draw like 4 cards. I think by this point my opponent wanted to play a game, because if I remember correctly, they actually play, even though I have already won the game. They decided to play a little bit longer. Super cool with me. All right, so we'll make some guys, play city, start drawing some cards one at a time. Let's see what we get. And nothing. Now I could clamp here and just draw some more cards, but I actually am not. I'm thinking that I don't want to just draw and throw them away. So I'll clamp next turn. For now, I've got other things I can do, like play another draw 3 card off of Tevesh's Szat. And what that does for me is that I can draw for 0 next turn and save my mana off to clamp. If I draw like a Sword of Feast and Famine or something like that, I still have this Thrall token in play, or this, so that they're not summoning sick. And also, you know, obviously I'm not drawing and discarding. But if you look at the scenario, if they play like Pithing Needle naming Skull Clamp or Tevesh Szat, they can't name both. So our engine's going to continue to churn with this play, which is really nice. So I just pause for a moment. I actually have too many cards and throw away a removal spell for Baral. This can't be a good feeling for my opponent. I'm not going to throw away a ramp. I mean, I could have thrown away a Winter Orb here, but I'm not going to throw away a Winter Orb against this opponent. And Winter Orb off City of Traders that then dies when I play a land is a great play. Opponent plays their Baral. I immediately go for a Rograkh. I want to do it on their turn, because if they have the commander counter, that's fine. If they have Force of Will here, that's fine. They end up exiling a Spell Pierce. But if they have a Force of Negation, they cannot play it on their turn, and that's also fine. So we'll do that on their turn. Opponent gets to do a little card selection there. I should have waited till my opponent's end of turn. Well, in case they selected right into like a crypt or whatever. But I think the reason I didn't was because I was holding Shaman and it was a bit of a trap, because I want a Shaman if they drew a crypt and played it. So anyway. All right, for my turn, I'm going to go ahead and just draw some cards here and see if I can get like additional mana sources that I can get into play, figure out what my best choice might be for the turn. So I'm going to lead off with a Thoughtseize, and I see all this. He'll get this counter, card draw, mana, recursion, exactly what you'd expect from a blue deck. Very good stuff, but not going to do it. I'm going to go ahead and just take their Ponder, because Ponder, yeah, sure, they have counter spells. The counter spells are going to be overwhelmed by the amount of cards I throw at them and their limited resources to actually play their counters. But Ponder might actually find them something that gets them in the game, like Sapphire Medallion. Say they draw for the turn, they draw Mana Crypt. They go Crypt, Sapphire Medallion, then they Ponder, and they hit Time Twister, and then they Time Twister for two blue because of Baral. You know, that's the kind of stuff, or 3 blue. Actually, they could just do it off of that right there. So that's the kind of stuff we're just trying to avoid, basically. So I'm going to go ahead and float some mana, and then play Expedition Map here. Play a Sulphur Springs and sack the City of Traders. And then let's get Baral off the table just to make it a little harder to do the exact kind of thing that I just described for my opponent. We'll leave the Thrall in play. Again, if I can have a creature left over, like just hanging out for my equipment, I always want that. I don't prioritize that, but I do, you know, keep that in the back of my mind, right? All right, so my opponent's turn, they play Sapphire Medallion, and then they realize, yeah, that there's no, I mean, this is not getting them in the game, right? So move on to the next game against the De Carolus. That was game 1, 2, 3, 4 is game. I think the game we're on. I think we've got 6 against this opponent. Yeah. All right. So no turn 3 commander. That's a mulligan. Okay, so this is risky. It's obviously risky, and I'm going second, but this could get a turn 3 commander. You lead with Rag. If you can connect, you get the mana source, or you lead with Mana Vault and look to draw a land. This could be a keep here. And I decided to go ahead and do it. I have Vandal Blast. I'm going to invest the Mana Vault into the commander, so not into Karn. So I get rid of the Karn and keep Vandal Blast in case they have a Soul Ring or something. Opponent's going first this time. Leads with an island and nothing. That's really nice to see because, you know, I've got the Mana Vault. Now I can definitely get the commander out early. But it does lead to an interesting consideration where I might go Ragavan here, even though I understand they're going to play Baral to block. Or I might lead with Thoughtseize here to sort of pave the way. But I feel like the right play here is probably Mana Vault. I want to see what I choose to do here. I don't remember actually. Yeah, good. I agree with my past self. So the reason you play Mana Vault here is now if my opponent taps out for Baral, I tap out for my commander, and that's their punish. So this might tell them, hey, I better not tap out. I should sit on a counterspell, which is great. If they sit on a counterspell, we play a land, we Thoughtseize them, take the counterspell, and then we play Ragavan. And then Ragavan says, hey, you better tap out for Baral, because if you don't, you know, I'm going to hit you with Ragavan and start getting cards and mana. So then the opponent has to tap out for a Baral. And we'll know what their hand is, and we'll know if there's a chance that they have a counterspell with the one remaining mana. We're thinking 2 turns ahead now. So on that turn, we can sneak our commander into play. So that's kind of what we're doing here. Of course, always play Rog. Always play Rog. All right, so my opponent flooded Strands and goes for Baral. So they decide to tap out, which gives us a window to play the commander, and we don't have to go down the Thoughtseize Ragavan line. That's what we would do if they left 2 blue up. But thanks to having top deck to Cabal Ritual, I can actually Ritual here and see what happens. And depending on what my opponent does, if they force a will the Ritual, then you know that's the end of the turn. But if they don't, I can Thoughtseize them and then play the commander. And that was a really sweet top deck there. So we'll go for that. We'll Cabal Ritual. It resolves. I Thoughtseize them, and we see this. What is this? Return target non-land permanent to his owner's hand. If 3 blue is mana spent, this create a food token. Okay, so this is bounce, time twister, counterspell, 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 bounce. Gross. But the main thing to keep in mind is that the bounce from Cyclonic Rift is the cheapest and easiest one. The turn into a pumpkin is at least a bit of work for them. So if I take the Cyclonic Rift here, I'm not going to take any of the counterspells. I can take the Rift here so that I can get the commander down now, and it's like right now they don't actually have the mana. They have to top deck a land to be able to bounce my commander with this card. And so, because Baral making it cheaper. So if I can get my commander down and they don't draw a land, they're way, way behind, right? And I can definitely also see potentially taking Time Twister, but at this point in the game, if they Twister with all these good cards in hand, they're actually gassing me up, and I'm okay with that. So the correct steal here is Cyclonic Rift, and of course that's what I choose. I've got the mana floating for the commander. Let's do it. Draw some cards. Oh, and I draw. So that's so awesome because now I can prevent them from attacking here by pressuring them. So I can actually play the Chrome Mox, imprint the Vandal Blast, play the Ragavan, and now they really don't want to attack in because Ragavan will swing back. But it also gives me like something to do with the Abrade, potentially Abrade, and then get Ragavan value. So this is just an awesome scenario for me. It makes their Time Twister much worse, and they don't draw a land here, so they can't even turn into a pumpkin. But they can play 2 counterspells, and that is something. So we're gonna have to kind of play around that. So for my turn, I draw him to Torque and a Duress. Pretty nice. I can't play both though because the Mox makes red, not black. So I decide that I'm going to Duress first. So we'll dismiss all the cards that I know of. Otherwise, I'll get they'll show up in duplicate, and then resolve the Duress, or resolve the counterspell. Remember, we know of 2 other counterspells there, and they discard Devious Cover-Up. So we know that they have like Negate, and they have another Memory Lapse. And they have turned into a pumpkin, and then I don't remember what the last card was. Oh, Time Twister. Right, so those are the cards that we know about. And then opponent actually plays Arcane Denial here. I think it's a terrible card, but in this case it kind of makes sense that they're using Denial to dig for mana, and then they plan to Time Twister and take the value away from me, it works out okay. Knowing that they probably will be trying to dig in that way, I'm going to go ahead and make the tokens. And I can either Skull Clamp or sit on a Braid. Well, if my opponent taps out for a Time Twister, I want to Braid Baral in response. So I'm going to just sit tight. I'm not going to run it out now because I know for a fact that they can Memory Lapse or negate that. Alright, so we'll draw some cards here. Very nice. And I'll do nothing for now. If they go for Time Twister, then like I said, I Braid in response. If they do nothing, then let's go ahead and just spend some of their mana on a counter. So my opponent's going to obviously counter here. They decide to use the negate that they have, craft their hand a little bit further by throwing away, turn into a pumpkin. Interesting choice with the Tevesh in play. Alright, so now I know that they still have Memory Lapse. But, oh, look at that gorgeous top deck. Let's get that Mana Crypt into play. Well, first things first, I can play the Drum or the Clamp. The Drum essentially costs me no mana, but I think, hey, let's just go for the Crypt. If they counter here, that's great. I have things I want to do that matter. And if they don't counter here, that's great too. I can convert the colorless mana into colored mana with the Drum. So they don't counter, so we'll go ahead and play the Drum. So if they didn't counter Crypt, they're not countering the Drum. Let's go for Clamp. Are they going to counter this card that says draw like 6 or more? They didn't? Okay. Alright, well, let's tap that Thrall and draw some cards and see what happens. I haven't hit a land drop yet. Keep in mind, I would love to draw like a Strip Mine or, hey, targeted this card. Let's Inquisition and then figure out what to do next. Alright, so opponent's going to Memory Lapse that. That's fine. I mean, they Memory Lapsed it, so you see the problem with Memory Lapse, right? We're just going to, how about just pay no mana and put that card in our hand? Oh, and a Mox Diamond. So lovely. Still have not even played a land yet, right? Going to Inquisition here, and these are our choices. Time Twister now, Expel from Orazka, bounces a permanent. Time Twister refills their hand. I've got tons of mana, they have very little. So bouncing a permanent, bouncing the Tevesh Szat is the best choice here. But Time Twister is the only way they can actually win the game. So Time Twister could combo, you know, they could have some kind of combo where they just completely go off. If I let them bounce the Tevesh Szat, I mean, what are the chances? Like, I'm just going to replay it. And I've got so much going on at this point in the game that I don't feel like it matters significantly. You know, they're just going to lose some tempo and some cards. I'm going to go ahead and eat the Rog here because I have not played a land yet. And I drew that Mox Diamond plus a Swamp. And this was exactly the kind of thing I was hoping for. Where now I can go Swamp, Mox Diamond. And there's a good chance that we can just take the Expel from Orazka from their hand with this hymn anyway. So let's see what happens. And boom. Nailed it. So now they're down to just some bad card drawing and some bad counterspell. Alright. We'll finish the turn off. You know, they're going to attack Tevesh Szat. That's fine. And, alright, Confidant here. Not really a good bait spell, but we can just draw a ton of cards off for Clamp. So let's get started. Not countering the Clamp was a huge mistake for them. Of course, I'm going to tap the creature for mana before I eat it. And at this point, finally, it clicks, and my opponent said that, yes, indeed, the Skull Clamp itself is actually going to win the game off the back of a Tevesh. I'm drawing 5 cards per turn. That's not really a sustainable position for Blue Mage to be in, besides the fact that he's super low on resources. If my opponent doesn't concede here, we'll go ahead and play the Grim Monolith and then Mind Twist him for 3, see what happens with that, and potentially get the God Pharaoh statue out. Might even do like a smaller Mind Twist, just trying to hit the disallow. Or get them to spend mana, you know, like a Mind Twist for 2 might be, yeah, a Mind Twist for 2 here is fine. And we spend 2 mana to play the Grim, and then 3, 4. Ooh, I guess I am short on God Pharaoh statue here either way. So I'd have to figure out exactly the way to run this hand, but at the end of the day, I mean, it doesn't matter significantly. I might just play like Dark Confidant, Gilded Lotus, Grim Monolith, and pass and let him counter any of that. And then next turn, with all the extra cards fueling us up, we'll go for the big Mind Twist God Pharaoh statue lockdown. But my opponent wisely concedes. I mean, the game was actually over earlier in the game, but they finally picked up on it. All right, so we're going to game 5 against the Careless. We'll play a couple more. So this is against Mono Blue, right? Like, Mono Blue should be able to, you would think a Mono Blue deck with Counterspell City should be able to stop this deck, but that is just not always the case. In fact, it is quite difficult. Oh, I guess in this game my opponent joined and didn't want to play, so we don't get to see what happened there. And then there was a little 4-minute pause, and then my opponent comes back. So maybe they wanted to like make some changes to their deck first, and then come back and then give it a shot. So that's what happens. And does this have a turn 3 commander? Yes, indeed, it does. We're going second here. And my opponent floats an Ancestral Vision, which means outside of a Force of Will or Force of Negation, or maybe Daze, you can see this would have been Rishadan Port. It's fine as a Carnarium, but it would have been obviously better as a port against this Blue Mage. But in this case, it's probably not going to matter. So we're just going to Ritual, Rog, Calling the Weak. What do you do next? Well, you invest it in permanent mana so that if they have a solution to like bounce for the commander, we can just replay it right away. And down he comes, we make some tokens and pass. Insane first turn. Opponent has an Ancestral Vision though. Alright, anyway, they get to play Baral, and during the upkeep we get to Vampiric Tutor. And the card I go get is Winter Orb. Just going to lock my opponent's mana down, make it hard for them to play the game. First things first though, let's draw some cards. See if there's anything that makes a difference there. Nothing too spectacular. So go ahead and play the Winter Orb and play the Rakdos Carnarium. Obviously Carnarium looks really good here because of the Winter Orb, but consider if it was a Rishadan Port, also excellent card to have with the Winter Orb and some alternate mana sources. So would not be unhappy in either scenario. In fact, probably would be more happy with the Port, to be honest. But anyway, I think we'll find a way to win this game. We'll go ahead and play Rog off of the Thran Dynamo and then just draw 3 cards, finding a Inquisition and Rakdos Signet. Very nice. Go ahead and fetch and Signet, and then put some mana into a Inquisition, and Inquisition sees Depths of Desire and Extraplanar Lens. Well, Extraplanar Lens gives them a way to work around like the damage that Winter Orb does. But I do have Destroy Target Artifact, so let's see what I choose. Doesn't matter, opponent concedes. They realize, yeah, the jig is up, game is over, and they're out of this game. Of course, I'm going to play Dark Confidant there. Almost certainly would have taken the Depths of Desire, encouraging them to play the Extraplanar Lens, which I would then kill with the Rampage. But yeah, I mean, we won the game before my opponent goes first turn Ancestral Vision, and it only gets to 2 counters before the game's over. That's a good game, right? At least for us. All right, anyway, so we'll move on to the next. Now we'll do the Pelican game, and we'll run through the rest. The Pelican game, and we'll run through the rest. So Pelican is one of the first Pelicans. There was Pelican and Pelicable, I think. Anyway, anyway, obviously here first turn commander is a keepable hand, but my opponent just concedes. So didn't even realize that that's what was going to happen there. They wanted nothing to do with it. All right, so Joel GS23 is the next opponent here. And, well, no, not a port. I'll just keep pointing that out. That would be Rishadan Port. But you can see how the card does kind of fit in the deck. On the right turn, you can do some really good stuff with it. Here, though, can I get a turn 3 commander? So if I'm going first, I go first turn map, second turn sack it and get an Ancient Tomb. Turn 3 Rakdos Signet. I can't quite get there, but I do have some pretty powerful, like turn 3 I go Chandra, make mana, play Rakdos Signet, so it's pretty close. This is one of those hands where the rule is almost always correct, but maybe because we're going first, this is okay. It'll be my opponent's 3rd mana in play. So it's not our turn 3, but it will be their turn 3, and I think it's close enough that this is worth a keep. Alright, so they go Temple, get up a Devil here. That's just a nice insurance policy. Alright, they're playing tap land here that doesn't produce 2 mana. We're going to do exactly what we said it before. Ancient Tomb into... So I changed it up a little bit. I Ancient Tomb into Karn. So the reason I Ancient Tomb into Karn is that I figured I'm so far ahead, the only way the opponent can get out of this would be to dump artifacts mana into play. And considering that their commander turns non-creature artifacts into artifact creatures, I'm fully expecting a bunch of artifacts out of that deck. So I decided that this would make more sense for me there, and then I could deal with getting, ramping out Chandra in a minute. And look at this, my opponent uses a entire turn, a card, and mana to kill my 0-drop. This is more than acceptable for me, right? So this is exactly why, oh, well, things are about to get messed up here. But this is exactly why I say, do not worry about playing your commander, just deploy it. And if your opponent has a turn like that, that's probably your opponent like losing the game on the spot, frankly. And Jessica's Will here will give me mana, but not cards. So I'm going to actually just deploy and get a bunch of, use Chandra's mana to play Rog again. And set up for the Jessica's Will next turn. The Rakdos is just sitting there being a signet that a Soul Ring that I haven't had time to play yet. And there it is. Of course, if it was a Rishadan Port, I'd feel a lot more comfortable here. Because my opponent sits on mana, I could just play Port and then port them during their upkeep and port them at the end of their turn, or on my turn, and push something through. Would be a lot stronger, right? Anyhow, either way, we move on to a game against Tippy21. And Tippy21 here, we do have indeed a commander that can come out within the first 3 turns. So this is a keep. Opponent leads off with Razorvine and Thicket, and we lead off with first turn commander. And I'm going to go ahead and just draw the 3 cards now and worry about discard. I'm going to go ahead and discard, it's fine. And I'll worry about what to do. Like, it's okay to throw away the extra cards there. And then now if my opponent has like a way to deal with Tevesh Szat, I've gotten my value from it. And wow, they do have a fast hand themselves. They've got Mana Crypt into Oracle, and Oracle has a Plains on the top, and there's a Wild Growth hiding there. So opponents ramped out past me, actually. And okay, so we'll see what we can do here with that. So I draw Liquid Metal Torque. I want to strip mine my opponent. I was planning to do it, but the issue for strip mining my opponent here is that they have that Oracle of Moldea, and that they're ahead on mana. And strip mining when you're behind on mana is often bad. It's often helpful for the person who's ahead on mana, more so than you. So in this case, I'm just going to make some thralls. Go ahead and play the Talisman here, and then I'm going to play a Torque as well. So now I'm ahead on mana, and then I'm going to set them back by playing Gorilla Shaman, Chomp, and eat their Mana Crypt. And so I've flipped it around. They were 5-4, and now I am 6-3. So I've doubled my mana over them. Hopefully they don't hit a land off the top, but we'll see. They do not, but they do have land from hand. They can play the Wild Growth if they want to. I'm not sure why they didn't run the Wild Growth out and then tap the land that they put it on, which I was, I'm sandbagging the strip mine for exactly that. But instead they run out Karametra just directly. So their devotion, so whenever they play a creature spell, they get to search for plains or forests. And this is the kind of deck that I was kind of talking about where Winter Orb is in this deck for, because there are still decks in the format that ramp out lots of lands as opposed to lots of artifacts, and Winter Orb is very good at stomping those decks. I'm going to go ahead and chomp and just protect some loyalty. In a couple turns, I can gain control of their Karametra there, and while it won't search anything out for me, it'll still work quite well. All right, this is a great turn. First things first, let's get a big ritual going, make some tokens, play Necropotence. Mind Twist the last 2 cards out of my opponent's hand. There we go. No need to take damage. Play the Winter Orb and lock their mana down. Play a Strip Mine so that I can Strip Mine whatever land they untap. Let's grab 7 cards, attack them with the Gorilla Shaman and pass, and at that point my opponent concedes. They have, at this point they're down to top decking with just this in play, and they only get to untap 1 land, which I'll promptly kill. And I get a new hand of 7 cards. Game's super over. Alright, next is J4s, of course. And J4s, of course, is playing Cardor, the horse. Cardor Doomscourge. She's going to, let's see, very strange creature, forces your opponent to attack, and does a little bit of life loss and life gain. Again, if a commander doesn't disrupt your opponent, aka kill their permanents, draw you cards or make you mana, strike it off your list. It's literally just not a commander. In this deck, you'd say, well, what about Rog? He doesn't do those things. Well, yeah, he does, because we have cards that tap in for mana and sack in for mana. So it very specifically draws me cards with Tevesh as well. So he actually produces both mana and cards over a typical game with this deck. This commander, on the other hand, that's a bit of a stretch to make that argument, and it certainly is worse than the quite a few other commanders you could play in those color combinations. Not the least of which is ours, but there are others too, like Prosper Tomebound, I think, is a much better commander in these colors, and so forth. So anyway, this hand does not get a commander on turn 3. So despite the fact that it has 4 mana and some free disruption and stuff, this is a mulligan. This hand does. This is a keep. Alright, so probably throw away a land here. Yeah, we can just throw away the one that always does damage to me. We've got a red source over here. We've got lots of mana. This looks great. And my opponent also had to mulligan. They mulligan down to just a few cards, so and they lead off with a Lucky Witness. Well, unfortunately, that mulligan from my opponent actually makes the Jessica's Will so much worse than it was. Again, play your turn 1 Rog. Alright, opponent fetches for a mountain. Interesting card, but too slow for us, I think. If it didn't come into play tapped. For whatever reason, doesn't attack me for 1. I don't think they realize this has no power. I think they figure it out next turn. Draw the Rakdos again instead of, I mean, imagine how much better Port would be just to, you know, opponent has barely any cards in hand and hurting for mana. Oh well. Alright, so I'm going to play the Marsh Flats, tutor, and pass. Because what's better than the commander? Well, like drawing all the cards with ad nauseum. So, alright, opponent gets another land into play. Plays a creature that either produces -1/-1 counters or that either kills a creature when it dies or makes a treasure, which is pretty good, actually. Anyway, they realize I don't have any power on my creature and attack for 1, and for my turn, I'm going to, excuse me, when that wind picks up, this mic is sensitive enough that the chimes get pretty loud. I've probably been bothering you for a while, apologize. Alright, end of their turn, I'm going to go ahead and ad nause, and with the giant ad nauseum, we'll drop down to 12, 11, 10, and stop. So why did I stop? Can we see all the cards in hand? I don't think so, but you'll see it in a moment. I found what I was looking for, which was either the card I wanted or a way to go get it. And that card is this one, Thought Vessel. And sure enough, of course, I've got a bunch of fast mana as well, but I'm going to go ahead and produce lots of it. And there's the Thought Vessel. There's a Lotus. There's Tevesh. Go ahead and make some blockers and just pass for the turn. And I'll finish the turn with, yeah, you can see here's actually what I paid the life to put in my hand. Boom, 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 boom. All these. And you can see I finished the turn with 18 cards in hand. So outside of Wheel of Fortune or Jessica's Will would probably be pretty good for my opponent here. There are very, very few punishes for this. If they kill Thought Vessel, that's fine. I have time. I'll deploy more of these cards and then discard down. But yeah, I even have time to just untap Mana Vault here. Very slow and lazy. Here you can see the little trick with City of Traders. Whoop-de-doo. That's not what matters now. I'm gonna go and just Jessica's Will. I hit Paradise Mantle, Skull Clamp, Fiery Confluence. Okay, thanks. Play the Mantle. Go ahead and just Mind Twist my opponent's hand. Play the Fiery Confluence. Opponent gets, I think, yeah, treasure. I don't have mana to put Skull Clamp into play, unfortunately. So Skull Clamp is not, because you have to equip the Paradise Mantle, and then these can't be summoning sec. But I don't have to discard either. And I think, even though I can't get the Skull Clamp engine running, I might have enough cards left to win a game. Opponent gets a treasure token. Shaman's value, by the way, has gone way up because there are a lot of things that make treasure tokens these days, and Shaman just noshes on all of them. So my opponent plays Sticky Fingers, which is another one of those cards that does make treasures potentially, and then has no play. For my turn, I'm just going to, yeah, equip Karn, shut down treasure token. We can just do it that way. We don't have to worry about Gorilla Shaman. Make more guys. Play the Shaman, because why not? Play Crucible. Pass for the turn. Basically, I played the shaman because I had very little else better to do. I'm still leaving up enough mana for an opposition agent. My opponent plays this strange card. Sort of doesn't matter. I figured he'd attack in knowing that, I mean, he's not going to with the shaman. I guess I could have not played the shaman to get him swing in and trick him so that I could flash out opposition agent and kill his hound. But at this point, I mean, the game's over. I'm just waiting for the opponent to scoop, right? All right, so we'll gain control of all commanders. We'll take his commanders. Now he's got to attack in. So go ahead and draw some more cards. Draw Wasteland here. Opponent actually has no cards for me to target. There's exactly one card that I never got to play because it got exiled with Jessica's Will. This is the other reason for exiling the Skull Clamp, was that Karn can retrieve it. So we'll go ahead and grab that. And I now have an absolutely insane card drawing engine to go with this Thought Vessel here. You can see it's clearly win more at this point, but kind of awesome how insanely good this is, right? So now we're just going absolutely crazy. We're just going to draw a bunch of cards, lock the opponent down under Winter Orb, get a smokestack running. Opponent has to attack here. They get to unearth another creature. Yeah, whatever. I have Bedevil up if I need it. I don't, but you know, what the heck. Go ahead and kill this. When an attacking creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life and I gain 1 life. Since that creature was attacking when I bedeviled it, that triggers, which, hey, you know, a little extra life here is good. We'll go up to 8 and then block that thing and go up to 9. And then I will Gorilla Shaman away my own Mana Crypt. Another really nice thing about it, because again, we don't generally have life gain. Of course, we have Smokestack, Gorilla Shaman, and a bunch of ways to eat our own Mana Crypt. So it's, for the most part, it's not a concern, but it's nice to have. Options. Go ahead and make some Thrall tokens, which is a draw 4. It's more than our commander can accomplish. I'm not sure why the opponent's still playing, but hey, they are. I go ahead and activate Grim Monolith with Karn, the tapped Grim Monolith, and I move Skull Clamp over to it. Then I play the Ready, and I sacrifice the Grim Monolith in order to kill his creature, which will then cause the Skull Clamp to draw me some more cards, because I was a little low on cards. Or at least that was the game plan. Oh no, I move it over. I don't do that with the Ready. Sorry, I make a construct, and then I do Death Cloud. So the goal here is I'm going to Death Cloud for 4. I want my opponent out of this game, or rather 3. I've got Smokestack on 1, so that's going to take care of the last card. And then the reason I made the token is that I can sack the Construct, the tapped Grim Monolith, which will draw me some cards, and then the Thrall, and I can keep my 3 creatures with actual value on them. I can surely find some things to sacrifice. So we'll go ahead and just sack all that. Opponent uses their on-death ability to kill my Gorilla Shaman. It's fine. I'm going to go ahead and attack for some damage here. I've got Winter Orb down, so I'm not even going to move the Paradise Mantle. I'll get around to it. Smokestack's going to eat their last permanent. They have 1 card in hand. I don't know why my opponent just doesn't concede here, but you know, it's fine. It's a chance to practice all the different cool moves, man, that I can do. So here I'm just going to sacrifice, what did I eat? Oh, Winter Orb, because it's not helping me anymore. Although I could do the Paradise Mantle trick with it. This was pointed out to me after the fact. So that's how I missed it. I would actually have left it in play, equipped it with the Paradise Mantle, made it a creature, and then just tapped it every turn so that it could stay in play and I wouldn't have to worry about it. But you know, now I've got Crucible Strip going, I've got Sword of Feast and Famine going, so my opponent, I take a card out of their hand with Inquisition, and now with Sword of Feast and Famine, the lock is fully complete. I have a Sword of Feast and Famine and a Smokestack, which means if they hold their card, I take it. If they play their card, I take it. There's no mathematical way to recover from this game. If there was any feasible, there's nothing that could possibly recover from this game, but at this point, we went from nothing realistically speaking to nothing mathematically speaking, which is just a little bit further of a lockdown. All right. So my opponent was having fun though, so I just finished it up, and we're going to get the win here. Big ol' Rog. And I thank my opponent for being an entertaining and cool person who has a nice outlook on this one. Of course, this is a commander, so I'm actually dealing tons of commander damage, 20 there. If I'd have moved the Skull Clamp over, I would have finished the game with them. With a flawless victory, my opponent has no cards in hand, no cards in play, and I actually could have even done negative life total and commander kill damage all in one shot. I missed it until after the fact. That would have been kind of a cool and unique way to win. But anyway, at that point, it's just victory lapping, right? All right, so we move on to Spleen Face. Well, that was long earlier in that game, but neat to see all the cards kind of interacting together. All right, can we go turn 3? Absolutely. Okay, we're keeping. And it's really nice to have both Thoughtseize and Vandal Blast, depending on what my opponent does. All right, and they lead off with Mystic Remora. God, this card's a little frustrating, obviously, but I'm going to show you how I believe you should play around the card. First of all, I can play Rog for free. Secondly, there's a chance that my opponent is using it. They're low on cards. They might be using it to dig for mana, so I'm not going to Vandal Blast the Chrome Mox here. This is probably incorrect, but I was hiding it as a sneaky. I think that, to be honest, the correct play here was to Vandal Blast the Mox Diamond. Go ahead and just give them the extra card, but take away the mana that they can use to play it, and then set them in a situation where their turn is used up, paying for the Mystic Remora's cost. So this was a mistake here. Of course, it would have looked brilliant if they missed their land drop there, which they did not. All right, so now they can play Finhorn Elves, and now it's really rough because it had killed the Mox Diamond. They pay the upkeep there. They would have just these 3, and 2 of them would have to be tapped. But now they still have the Mox Diamond, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to stick the Vandal Blast or not. And the problem here is that I have better things to do with my turn than Vandal Blast, so I really needed to use it last turn. And the better things are just play the freaking commander, right? So my opponent draws 1 card here. I play the commander. They draw another card. It's a bummer. But it's 1 blue, draw 2, which is a really good card. But I now have 0, draw 2, and 0, draw 3 in play. So if they don't deal with this right away, the value that they're getting from the Mystic Remora is completely offset by the value that I'm getting from the Tevesh Szat. They decided to actually pay for it, which is really interesting there, and pass. So with them paying for it, okay, I'm going to just go ahead and draw some extra cards here. And again, I'm not super worried about if your opponent has cards in hand, stick them with mana denial. If they have no mana, hit their cards in hand, right? We always attack their weak point. We don't attack their strong point. The opponent is strong on mana, so we're going to attack they're strong on mana and cards because of this combination here. But we can pinch their mana pretty hard and make it just a bunch of cards in hand that they can't cast. So that's kind of the goal here. So we're going to lead off with, I'm going to go ahead and get my mana developed because I don't want to be mana pinched. Like, if I allow this to stop me from developing, so I'm going to allow them to draw some extra cards here. I'm just going to kill their Mox Diamond. Well, the card they draw off of the discard is, off of the Mystic is a counterspell, which means that from my point of view, I used a card that I got for free off my Thralls. They used a card they got for free off the Mystic Remora. It's a wash. Now I'm just going to do it again. And then finally, I'm going to Thoughtseize them, so they're going to get 1 more card. So they're back up to 7 cards now. And this card has drawn them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards for a blue, which seems kind of stupid. But at least I get to take the best card in their hand out of their hand, and that sets me up knowing what to do. And soon I can recuperate all this lost value. I've got Sword of Fire and Ice, which is one of the other reasons getting extra mana sources in the play and such. We take a look here, and it's like, well, they've got Hermit Druid to combo me out, Neoform to tutor, Swan Song to disrupt. This is pretty bad. Deadly Rollock, not so big of a deal. Fiend Artisan, not a big deal. Hermit Druid, if you don't know, they activate it and mill their deck until they hit a basic land. It's usually put in decks that don't have any basics, and what they do is they mill their entire deck, and then they have a card like Memory's Journey, which allows them to, during their upkeep, put exactly what they want to draw on top of their deck, 3 cards, and then one of those cards is going to be, the card that they're going to put on top of their deck is going to be Thassa's Oracle, and so this combination will win the game, and you can't take the Memory Journey because it has flashback, so I could take the Hermit Druid here, but I'm really wanting to recoup my card advantage that I've lost by taking the Deluge. So I decide that what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Swan Song and leave them with the ability to like do a little something, but all their little somethings pretty much involve getting creatures into play here. And also I'm expecting Mystic Remora to go away here. They're not going to pay for it. Most likely they're going to realize that time has come and gone for that. So, of course, that goes away as expected. So let's see what happens here. So the Waterlogged Grove we know about comes down. Opponent plays the Hermit Druid to set up their combo kill. And then I'm just hoping they play a little more, right? They play Thrasios, beautiful, just a 1 mana untapped. This looks pretty good. Alright, so for my turn, I'm going to tap my Thrall for mana and draw again. And not great to see the opposition agent, but not horrible. Alright, so unless they drew a counter spell, and it's literally the one card we don't know about, the Deluge Shear is going to be quite good. So we're going to go for that. And yes, it sticks. Excellent. So major threat averted. And now's a really good time to go ahead and get a draw 3 into play. I could get the Signet into play for more mana. But actually, I would rather draw 3 because what I'm looking for is I'm looking for more disruption over here. Because this is a combo deck, and I want more. I'm looking to close this game out before they can put together like a Thassa Oracle combo or something else that I'm concerned about. Plus, I'm hoping to tempt the Rollick out of their hand, you know, them thinking like, oh, cool, I can prevent them from drawing cards. And then the opposition agent becomes good. And against a combo deck, having an opposition agent in play, often quite good, especially when they're holding a card you know searches their deck like Neoform. So I play Fiend Artisan, which we knew about. All right. I'm going to go ahead and play a land for the turn and then run out Liliana in an attempt to kill their Fiend Artisan. Yeah, opponent has nothing. Sticks. We're good to go. Still haven't talked him into the Rollick, but actually they can't free play it without their commander in play, so that's totally fine with me. And at this point, my opponent concedes, and we move on to the next game against I'm a Donkey, another CEDH player. Always a challenge to face. And they're playing Thrasios Tymna, just like the last guy. I do not have a turn 3 commander, so this is a mulligan. Okay, so do I have a turn 3 commander with this hand? Well, I'm going first. And going first, I can go land, Amber, commander, Ragavan with dash, attack, put a treasure into play. So that's turn 1, I've got 3 mana. So turn 2, I can dash in and attack, and I've got 4 mana. And turn 3, not quite there. But I could also, that's assuming I draw no lands at all within the next couple of turns, no mana sources at all, which is a bet that I'm actually willing to take. So I decide that this is a theoretical turn 3 commander, so this is another one of those borderline situations, but because it probably makes the cut, and I've also got artifact mana and Feed the Swarm, so I've got removal for a fast start, and I've got disruption and mana source with the sword here, or I could go the Necropotence route, but with double red as my mana source, I think that's what I'm going to pitch. I decide this is the keep, and we'll go for it. A lot of this has to do with going first here. But yeah, Ragavan in and connects. All right, so Ragavan reveals Remand. Unfortunately, not a Llanowar Elf or something like that. Bird of Paradise would have been really nice. So we'll pick up the Ragavan. So, all right, we're on 3 mana already. For my opponent's turn, they get to go Scrabland, Sarah, Ascendant. Aren't I glad I held the removal? Because that gets in the way of Ragavan, right? And top deck a Drum that's not stellar for me, but it's acceptable. It does mean that I'm much closer to getting that early commander. All right, let's see if I can kill. With that out of the way, I might actually... I look, and my opponent actually... This doesn't make blue or green, so they don't have a turn 2 Thrasios. So there's a good chance that if I deploy Ragavan here, I can just get in and get another hit and get my treasure back. On the other hand, if I just draw any land, I can play my commander. So what do you do here? What I do is I don't take a chance with it. If I deploy Ragavan and they kill it or whatever, then Ragavan's pretty bad here. I can always dash it out next turn as a backup plan if I don't draw a land. But because I have the ability to play my commander next turn, which is the magical turn 3 sort of target zone for that, I'm not going to sack the treasure to play Ragavan. And then, you know, it turns out that they play like, say, Dranith Magistrate or something. Well, that would be sort of worst case scenario. But let's say they play like a blocker or something, and I can't get in there with Ragavan. I've used a treasure up. Not really worth it to me. Uh-oh. What is it? Sylvan Library. A card that I do not like to see. A card that's very good, but a card that is not as good as drawing 3 cards. You have to be very careful here, by the way. So if you don't tap correctly here, like if I, to play my commander, I think there's a way that I could actually screw this up. No, not so much, because I'm not sacrificing Ragavan, but in a different scenario where I was like Cabal Ritualing, if I didn't tap in the right order or whatever, or if I had Mox Opal in play and I didn't tap in the right order instead of Mox Amber, I could have screwed this situation up here, but here it's totally fine. Of course, I could hit with the sword and untap the lands and then play Ragavan or something, but if you can get your commander down, do it. All right, and it sticks. Let's Ancestral. Oh, what a glorious top deck. We'll just Mana Crypt into Ragavan again, and he's ready to go, and this time we can get the sword rocking. Beautiful. All right, so the opponent's turn, obviously not a... I'm a Donkey knows how to play and just takes all 3 cards, right? They get their Ancestral off. They play Esper Sentinel. First non-creature spell is going to give them a card, most likely. So be it. And they're going to play Arcane Signet. I thought he was playing Thrasios here, but he plays Arcane Signet into Nature's Claim on the Crypt. I like this play. Makes it more likely the Sentinel's going to proc. Makes it harder for me to leverage the extra cards I drew. That is good playing. I top deck a Mishra's Workshop, which is great here. I'm going to go ahead and just make some thralls that I can use for the drum, so I'm not tapping the creature I want to attack with. And then I look at it, and I've actually got enough mana to sort of sandbag the Workshop for a turn, so I'm going to just play it that way and go for a Sword of Feast and Famine. I'll pay for it. I'll equip it. And remember, Menace. I can't chump block here and prevent the sword from proccing. Also, Trample. Alright, so I'll hit my opponent, take away one of the cards that my opponent picked up. I get a Malevolent Hermit. This then untaps the mana and sets me up for a nice little a braid on the Sentinel. But I realized that I actually have a slightly more interesting thing I can do. It sets me up. Remember, Sentinel's an artifact creature, and this is an artifact. And you know what? Why don't I play Ragavan here and then just move that sword over so that I can start connecting with the angry monkey there, and then set myself up for a really solid Vandal Blast turn. All right, so my opponent's turn, pays mana again. Now the life total is starting to add up, and having the sword like punching my opponent for a hefty amount of damage here is actually mattering. So they play Talisman. This is beautiful, just all part of this setup turn. It's so glorious, right? Opponent plays Grist, and Grist, I love this card, cannot sacrifice a creature, destroy target creature or planeswalker, cannot target the Ragavan thanks to the sword having been moved. So you can take out Tevesh Szat here, but Ragavan is actually a big problem. So they take out they take out Tevesh. Removing the Esper Sentinel, who could have chump blocked the Ragavan. Of course, they don't know that I have the Vandal Blast. So I'm sad to see the creature go because I want to VB it. And then finally my opponent fetches before I fetches in order to get the shuffle for the Sylvan before their turn starts and not get hit by an opposition agent. So this is good play. Of course, we're a little ways off from Threshold with the Barbarian Ring to kill the Grist. We'll worry about that later. Look at that lovely card off the top is a Grim Monolith. So I get to play the Grim, cast the Vandal Blast, attack in, take another card from my opponent, deal some significant damage at this point. I can take a delay, exile a Gaia's Cradle, which I can't play. Not because I played a land, well, because I played a land, but also because you can't play lands off Ragavan. And I get a treasure token, and then, with the amount of mana that I have left, I actually get to run down my commander again, thanks to the power of Sword being a mana flare. We'll go ahead and draw some cards immediately, and Workshop into Soul Ring. I don't mind if I do. And finally, we get to duress the opponent using the Springleaf Drum and take their Muddle the Mixture and set up for a Vampiric Tutor turn. And we're getting very close to this game being 100% over. I also have some mana, so I can move the sword over. And the reason I move the sword off the Ragavan here is because I may be wanting to attack Grist with one creature and attack my opponent with the other creature. And so I'd rather have the ability to go Grist or double two creatures at Grist, like if they have a blocker, so that I can't abrade out of the way somehow. So I want to be able to kill this thing next turn. And I mean, Grist does produce a 1/1 insect that I can kill, but that creature actually is, I think it's a black and green insect that sort of Feast and Famine can, push through. All right, so my opponent Sylvans and realizes there's nothing that they have that will get them out of this situation. Not with, I mean, what they could have done there is they could have drawn Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation or Tainted Pact and then instantly killed me. So do not take this scenario lightly. If your opponent ever has that going, I 100% was going to search for a way to kill their lands, because if I don't kill their lands, I could lose any time on the spot, no matter what their life total is. So it's super important that we deal with that. But I put my opponent in a situation where they only had one turn to do it, which was really nice, and they did not do it. So we run to the final game here. Is this game against I'm a Donkey, game number 2, played this morning, and again Thrasios and Timna, and no turn 3 commander is a mulligan. Okay, so here's one of the exceptions. I don't have a turn 3 commander, but I've got a turn 2 Necropotence. That is an acceptable alternative. So I'm going to throw away the Death Cloud. That's for later in the game. Lead off with Rog. Also, I'm going first, which is pretty important here. Imprinting Fire Covenant against a creature-based deck, which is disappointing, but I think that free is better than spending mana and life to potentially get multiple things, because we're going to get tons of card advantage from Necro, and so we just don't need that. So mana, playing cards for free when you have a Necropotence is far more important than getting card advantage, because Necro will provide all the card advantage that you need. Let's go ahead and get that Signet down and pass. All right. Opponent Gitaxian Probes here, and if I'm my opponent at this point, he'd probably look and concede. An opponent does not concede, which means he probably has a counterspell. But there's always a chance my opponent didn't concede because he's hoping that, like, forlornly I won't play Necro, and then, or somehow he's going to beat Necro. So even if my opponent has a counterspell here, I have to play the game. I can't not play the game and then hope, and then just let him build up resources till he can play spell plus counter, spell plus counter. That's not a game winner. A land here was really nice to see, because it means that next turn I can play my commander if I draw another one. So we're going to go for the Necro as our main plan, and our backup plan might be to just draw land. And I go for a Necro, and does have a counter. Okay, well, I get a 2/2. I can, apply some minimal pressure with that. Opponent thought seizes me in advance of playing their commander, because he has the Gitaxian Probe to know that this is there as a trap. So the Rograkh is gone now. And then plays Mystic Remora. Yuck. Well, as much as Mystic Remora sucks, I'm not going to let it stop me. I could wait a turn here, let him pay the upkeep, strip mine the other land, or something like that. But there's no guarantee I'm going to draw another land. I'm out of cards, right? So you draw a card, I'll draw 3. That is an acceptable exchange. So take your card. Hopefully it is not a counterspell, a free counterspell. And boom, it is not. All right, let's get our cards. Lovely stuff, and get a little bit of damage in there. All right, so now my opponent's struggling under the Mystic Remora of their own making, basically. Gets the Nature's Claim and Arcane Signet. I'm not sure why they chose that over Chrome Mox. I guess it doesn't make much difference at any rate. Oh, probably because it's easier to play Chrome Mox from the graveyard with Yawgmoth's Will. I guess that's a good reason. Blackleaf Cliffs here will come into play untapped if I use my Strip Mine. And of course I want to Strip Mine when there's a Remora running, so we're just going to go ahead and do that now. And of course I want to get untapped blue. Playing the Rog, which will not feed them any cards, I will draw 3. And play the Cliffs. And I almost don't care at this point. I am going to play the Springleaf Drum. Get cards into play, because card advantage not as important as mana development, and I'm really hoping that encourages them to pay for the Mystic Remora here, and then I'll immediately go for an Ad Nauseam. So let's see what happens. They do. Excellent. Or will I immediately go for an Ad Nauseam? Well, I'll wait and see. Yeah, that's right. I was going to wait and see, because Mystic Remora might go away. This would give them 2 cards. This would give them none. So yeah, I just wait. All right. So we'll go ahead and just make some tokens and pass. Now it's just a waiting game. Remora is going to go away, and then before they draw their card. With only 6 cards and no blue, now we're going to go for the ad nauseum. And this also allows me to store the Calling the Weak for post nauseum plays. Boom, and oh, opponent has drawn a Force of Will, uses Mana Drain. So drew it after the Tevesh Szat came into play, presumably. Really nice to see that go. And then for their turn has no play. And okay, well, fair enough. I'm going to go ahead and play Rog here. Draw more cards. And this is lovely. I've got Intent, Calling, Tomb, Stack. Let's get some stuff going here. So play the Tomb, attack. And then we'll go ahead and Calling, float some more mana, Intent. And I Thoughtseize them with exactly 3 mana and an untapped land left. So we're going to Thoughtseize them to make sure that the coast is clear and recovery is not possible. We want to take like a disenchant out of their hand. And then play the Smokestack and then lock them out of the game as soon as possible. So, wow, look at that. Consult is part of the way there. Edric, don't care. Grim Tutor, not a big deal. Neoform, probably not a big deal. Worldly Tutor, he can play it, but then he has to play the creature, and then I'm going to kill the creature. So I'm happy with them using a turn to Worldly Tutor for a creature that doesn't matter much. But if you look at Consult, Worldly Tutor, or Neoform, the opponent has actually got everything they need to put together Thassa's Oracle combo. They just don't have the mana, which is what we're trying to disrupt here. So I'm going to go ahead and take the other half of the combo, right? Let's take Demonic Consult. They can worry about putting together cards that I can deal with later. And we'll get the Smokestack down. And now we're going to really crush the opponent's mana. And my opponent says, hey, do you mind if I concede? And I'm like, yeah, of course. So there's no hope here for the opponent anymore, having taken away half of their combo. And they're not going to be able to put that together. And without the combo, and without any way to deal with Smokestack, they were going to swiftly be stacked into oblivion, and that is it. So that is the deck as it is now. Those are all the changes discussed. You get to see all of it in play, except for you didn't get to see the Rishon Important action. Unfortunately, it didn't come up because that was the most recent change, is the addition of the port and the loss of the pickup land. I would really like to pick up land back in here, but once again, no idea what to cut for it. In the meantime, that is it. This is it for the Bullseye deck. I hope you enjoyed watching. I look forward to your comments below, and thank you very much. I'll see you next time.